Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Place and Economic Development Committee for November 2024. Before we hit the main agenda, I've just got an announcement to read out. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is streamed and recorded live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed, and once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking and to just turn them off when they've finished. Thank you very much. Before we hit the main agenda, if it's all right with members, I'd like to just shuffle the agenda a little bit. After we've had the public participation, I'd like to move on to agenda item 8, which is the splash pad, followed by agenda item 9, pavement licensing, and then we'll just follow the rest of the agenda if that's all right with members. No dissent? Thank you very much. So, Margaret, any substitutes or apologies?
Yes, Chair. We've got Councillor Scott for Councillor De Serra, Councillor Sobchak for Councillor Stephen, Councillor Holmes for Councillor Alcott, and we've also received apologies from David Blake, the Managing Director, who's unable to be with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest? Edward?
I would like to declare I am a member of Worcester Theatres Board and I know that they're going to be discussed this evening. I also was given a VIP ticket to attend one of their shows recently, the value of which I've repaid in full to the theatre via donation bucket.
Thank you very much for that. Any others? Marvellous, thank you. Any public participation?
There's none, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Jessie, I will do the minutes first and then we'll go on to agenda item 8. So, if we just go through the minutes for your approval, page 1, page 2, page 3. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. In the 5-minute break, 2 councillors left, Councillors Riaz and Olcott. I'd like that to be minuted so that when there are unanimous decisions, there's no ambiguity about how they voted because they weren't there. Thank you.
If I may clarify, I don't think we record in the minutes whether a decision is unanimous or not. We just say a decision was carried.
Okay. Thank you. Page 3, I think we were at. No. Page 4, page 5, and then finally page 6. If I could, then I just want to make 2 comments. The first being congratulations to the bid team. The bid has been renewed for the next 5 years. The results of the election pay testament to the hard work that BID have done over the last few years and the effort that the team have put in. And I'd also like to say a big thank you to the team involved with the construction of the pump track in Batten Hall Park. The developers were extremely happy with the way that officers dealt with them and worked with them. And I think over the weekend, and I think, Paul, you made a comment as well to officers, that it was a well-enjoyed facility on the first 3 days of its open. So thank you again to the team that were responsible for building that. Right, on to agenda item 8 then, please, which is the splash pad.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. Before you start, I'm getting ahead of myself, Jessie. You are invited to speak.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak. So I'm here, I'm not usually in this committee, but I've come here today because of this item. So as a claims counsellor, the splash pad is something that comes often at the door, and I have been painfully aware of issues that we have faced. I also know that the solution was never straightforward, that we have aging equipment, and that simply just needs replacing. And it's something that will cost, and I know that we need to balance the needs of this facility with other needs in the city. However, I was very, very pleased to see read the report, and I think Lloyd Griffith have done the impossible. I have it on good authority. This has been your creative solution, that you've managed to do the impossible of finding a way of funding the repairs without going into reserves and without significantly affecting other areas at least in the very short term. So I know that this facility is strictly speaking in the Claines and Arboretum area, but it's a facility that is enjoyed by children all over the city, and it would be an absolute shame to see it close or have another year of freaking breakdown. So I've come here today just simply to thank officers for all the work that has been done to coming with a solution, and to encourage members to support the recommendations in this report. And that I hope that members will see the benefit that it will be to invest in this facility, which services the city, and it's such an important asset to our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessie. Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Councillor Jagger for her comments. Chair, hopefully members have had a chance to read the report. I'll just sort of cover off some of the key points, if you don't mind. The splash pad was installed in 2010, and obviously the engagement and consultation work we did through the Worcester Play Plan recognised and confirmed how highly valued the facility is, but also how busy it can get at times as well. Just a bit of technical stuff. The splash pad, we've got a Gallivant. This class is a recirculatory splash pad, so it's got a big tank underneath the ground and a water filtration system, and the water gets disinfected before being sprayed onto the play area. So it just goes round and round and round and gets cleaned and goes back onto the splash pad. And there is some water loss that's taken off on bodies, clothing, and through evaporation. And there will be nobody more aware than members of how unreliable the splash pad has become over recent years, with regular periods of downtime due to mechanical malfunction. We engaged the original installers of the splash pad to come back and undertake a condition survey of it, and that confirmed that the water filtration system has reached the end of its life. And that's not unsurprising, given that the splash pads typically last for 7 to 10 years, and this one is now in the 14th year of its life. And in terms of options to improve the operability and resilience of the splash pad, as part of looking at that work, there was an alternative type of splash pad that we've looked at, namely a flow-through system. And they can offer increased resilience and require lower maintenance. And they basically work through mains water, gets pumped into the system, goes through the water features, the play features, and then gets lost again through the drainage system back into the below-ground drainage. So obviously one of the key issues there is that higher water usage and more water loss. Just to focus on the current condition of the splash pad, as I say, the below-ground water filtration system has been written off in effect. But paragraph 2.8 just bullet points some of the key findings. So the splash pad, concrete pad, ground spray and aquatic structures are in good condition. As I say, the water treatment plant's reached the end of its life, with one of the underground tanks has actually imploded. The current wet pour safety system, so that sits on top of the concrete. You've got a certain thickness of safety pour system. That is damaged in some places and starting to become more vulnerable. So it's being recommended to undertake some work in respect of that. And there are certain bits and pieces, foot activators and a couple of drainage grills that aren't functioning and require replacing as well. And again, just to clarify that in 2024 compared to previous years, the splash pads had to close for more than 2 weeks, and that's based on a shorter operating period as well. So that's why the sort of pressure's been felt doubly. What we don't receive any feedback on in respect to the splash pad, certainly not from an officer point of view, is the design of it or the usability of it, other than when there's downtime. And therefore, members that have picked up this report's not proposing that we do any works to the above ground features, other than replace the wet pour safety surface and increase the thickness of it. And part of that is to ensure that we've got a splash pad operating for next summer in times with the operating periods. Part of the other bits and pieces that we've picked up and which will help us hopefully run a more efficient facility moving forward is a lot of other sites will actually close the facility during bad weather, not keep it open. I presume that just means that there's less usage of pumps. And I think one of the other things that we've learned is that we've probably got one of only few splash pads that have got railings around it and fences, which creates pinch points. So that's something, again, we're going to look at for next year. Rather than having staffs monitoring queues, they've got far better things to be doing. And we need to rely on mums, dads, grandparents and carers to manage the little ones. Table in 2.15 just shows the increasing costs associated with our splash pad. Revenue costs, so 22-23, just over 50k. Similar in 23-24, and in 24-25, again, based on a shorter operating period with more downtime, it was £37,000. When you break that down into operating hours, in 2023 it cost us £59 per operating hour to run the splash pad. That went up to £74 per operating hour in 2024. So again, it just shows how much more expensive our facility is. 220 sets out the pros and cons of the system. It is a flow-through system, and I'm sure members will have looked at both those columns. But as I say, for as simple a system of flow-through system is, there's a significant amount more water loss, which doesn't really sit well with our environmental sustainability strategy. And obviously with increased water comes increased water. And that sort of replicates itself through into the table, paragraph 2.21, in terms of the revenue costs comparison. Per annum, we're forecasting 17.5 or 17.7k per annum for a recirculatory system, compared to 18.3k for a flow-through system. So again, even though there's more complicated parts with a recirculatory system, a bit more monitoring, a bit more cost, the cost of water wipes out any benefit. Just moving on into procurement and programme timelines, paragraph 2.27. Subject to approval this evening, and Policy and Resources Committee in a couple of weeks' time, we will look to commence a procurement exercise and look to appoint a contractor during January. So it's important to note that what we've done so far is that we've commissioned a condition survey of the site. What we've not done is gone out to procurement, but as part of that condition survey, I'm talking to another contractor, and we've got a good feel for the sort of costs that we're looking at to basically swap out the below ground water filtration system and move that to above ground. So it's out of harm's way. And being able to appoint a contractor in January and start in February based on the sort of works that we're looking at, that gives 8 to 12 weeks to complete the programme, which means we can be up and running in time for the operating season next May. So paragraph 230, Chair, and the conclusion hopefully sets out in simple terms why we're going down this route of replacing the below ground water filtration system and sticking with the recirculatory system rather than the flow-through system. So I won't dwell on that. And then obviously the other part of this report is an update on the Worcester Play Plan. It's a short update because, as Councillor Jaggers has pointed out, much of our focus has been on trying to get a plan together for the splash pad. But there are some brief bullet point updates against each of the priority projects. But please, members, note that this will now become a priority for us in order to get it up and running for May. Just in terms of how we intend to fund it, as has been said, this committee approved £400,000 worth of community infrastructure levy funding, or probably over a year ago now, to progress the Worcester Play Plan projects. We've committed and you've allocated £104,000 of that, £106,000 of that for some additional resource to support Alan New. And we're in the progress of recruiting that additional resource, and that leaves £294,000 of SIL money, which we're intending to put towards the project. And there are also two planning related projects which I've listed at paragraph 5.1 for some additional funding, and that brings us out to the total amount that we believe we need, Chair. If there's any change in that, we will come back to committee and update members. But we believe in good faith that between SIL and the two Section 106 contributions, that will be sufficient to cover the costs of the project. So I'll stop there, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Lloyd. But it's probably worth mentioning that the community infrastructure level gets replenished over time. So although it is a significant portion of the pot, we will get back as more development occurs in the city. So I'll open it up to members now. Any points? Thank you.
Oh, thank you, sorry. Have a half term and forget how to work things. Just a comment for me, I think, really, actually. Just thank you for the report and the work that it reflects. And I just wanted to make sure that it was said out loud that the splash pad, a loss of the splash pad would be a huge loss to the play offer that we have in the city. Water play is really quite crucial sensory aspect of play for children. And we don't have any other provision that really mirrors that in the city at the moment. So that's really important. I look forward to the splash pad hopefully being fully operational again next year. I've also had some water safety groups reach out to me and comment on the fact that actually familiarity with water and water play is a really crucial step in water safety, and that we mustn't underestimate that, especially in a river city. And then also I hope that as we move forward we have a variance in the type of water play in other spaces and play spaces across the city, because that would be brilliant. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Hannah?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this report. Two things for me, please. Well, first of all, let me start off by saying, as a very local resident of Gulliver Park, how much my family and my friends enjoy and value that space. Many birthday parties are had, let's meet at the splash pad. So especially for people that can't afford birthday parties, that's a thing we do, and it's just a really lovely, valuable space. So I absolutely echo Councillor Collier's comments. Can we make sure that this is factored in to the life cycle of this project so that we're not met with any surprises in the future? And secondly, when we go out to procurement, can we make sure that we're really focusing on the net zero plans of the contractors so that we're reducing our own Scope 3 emissions? Thank you.
Sorry, yes, Trevor.
Thank you. Sorry, I thought you were going to come back on this.
Yeah, I was just going to confirm, absolutely, we'll talk to property about how we can build into the sort of forward plan budget around, you know, a replacement cost that hadn't been factored in this time. So there's a balance there, isn't there, about, you know, managing the medium-term financial plan. But I'll pick that up with the property team. And in respect of your second point, absolutely, within our procurement rules, we will push that point as much as we can.
Jabba.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously welcome this report in terms of that. Having experienced the what we could probably call the Lido prior to the splash pad, whether it was a Lido or full Lido, but anyway, sort of a semi-swimming pool back in the day, and the significant investment that we've made in the offer for water-based play within the area. I think it's a premier facility that people come to and expect Worcester City Council, and it's part and parcel of our fabric within the city that people have come to expect in terms of that. So really welcome this investment in terms of that, and the way that we've managed to be able to kind of finance it as well. And not only does it reaffirm our commitment in terms of children and young people and the policies that have been signing off recently, and the £1 million investment that we've made as City Council in terms of play, it reaffirms that commitment, and on paper as well as in action as well. And welcome Councillor Collier's comments from a children and young person's champion's point of view, and what she's managed to pick up from the advice that you got. It does beg the question, obviously, in terms of maintenance going forward. This is an above the ground system. Hopefully it will be easier to maintain, less costly. Therefore, the question from my point of view, if it's going to cost us less to maintain and we're budgeting for it, are we able to open it for a longer period of time than it's currently open?
Thank you, Gemma. Lloyd?
Chair, I think obviously that's not a matter for this report this evening. I think what I would prefer to do, perhaps with a new facility, is perhaps operate it for a single year and see how it operates, and then perhaps review for the following year. I'd be a little bit reluctant to perhaps commit to opening it for a longer period without knowing how it's operating first of all.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the answer, Lloyd. I appreciate that until it's operational and I suppose in action it's still really difficult to say, but we are investing a lot of money in this. It is a premier facility within the city, one of our premier parks, and it brings joy to thousands and thousands of children every year, and we want to maximise the opportunity to be able to bring that joy to hundreds more kids.
Thank you, Jabba. Karen?
Thank you, Chair. I too am very pleased that this is being replaced, because you do get a number of contacts about it. But I was just saying, if we end up delayed in the opening, could we have some advance notice as councillors? It doesn't need to be razzmatazz, but it would be useful to us if we knew in advance. That was all I would ask. Thank you.
Absolutely, Chair.
And Edward?
I want to play for the briefest contribution of this meeting. Clearly, a lot of work has gone into this report. The costs and benefits of the two possible systems have been weighed up thoroughly. The play offer and water play, it's absolutely wonderful. The only possible complaint that I can conceive of is that we don't have one of our own in Warndon. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul and Jenny.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just add my voice to having longer opening hours for the splash pad in the future? We're experiencing climate change. It's getting hotter, especially in the school summer holidays, and that extends into the evening. And with this kind of level of investment, I think it's important that it's available to families and children when it's needed. And at 2.14, we're talking about inclement weather closing it, which makes sense. But I'd like to see the flip side of that. When it's hot, that we extend it if we can. I know there's budgetary constraints, but it's a big investment.
A bit before I move on to Jenny, last year we did make budget, or we committed to budget savings by shortening the hours the splash pad was open. I think the suggestion from Lloyd that we keep it running for a year on the current operating hours, and then see whether or not we can whether the efficiencies are making sufficient savings for us to allow to extend the opening hours of the splash pad. Do I need an amendment to this to stipulate that, or shall we just accept that as being read? Right, thank you very much. If that's all right to members. Jenny?
Thank you, Chair. The only concern I've got on the whole of this paper, because otherwise I very much welcome it, and having had experience of enjoying the park and seeing families in the park, and of course it's going to be open across the river very shortly with the bridge coming through. I think it's a fantastic part of the city and can only be beneficial. My issue is removing the railings, perhaps, because we put them up as to actually safeguard young children, and I would like a little bit more detail on that before that part of it signed off. But I can understand why you don't want to crowd people in, but you also don't want anybody to rush through and knock over half a dozen kids at the same time. So I think there needs to be some kind of balance on health and safety there.
Yeah, I think from talking to neighbouring councillors and councillors a bit further afield, we didn't find anybody who's got a barrier or a guard around their splash pad. There are some sort of natural features, but certainly not anything like we've got. And I think bluntly, what we've done means that while it's in operation, we have a member of staff stood there managing queues, and we can't afford to do that anymore. We simply can't afford it, particularly when we've lost numbers within our parks team, and really we want those parks members of staff to be doing other things, not queue monitoring. So that's the reason, that's the learning we've picked up, and that's the intention. That's not to say we won't have any features around it that will try and dissuade people from undertaking that sort of activity, but we won't try and we need to try and move away from the pinch points that we've currently got.
We've heard a lot of voices in favour. Can I just open the floor to anybody who's anti the recommendations in the report? Yep. Sorry? I can't lip read at the moment. Sorry, Hannah.
Sorry, Chair, thank you. Can I make a comment about being anti about the railings? Thank you. So I've been in various splash pads, for example, in Evesham, and I can remember the splash pad with my own children before the railings were there. And it just feels more organic, it feels, just feels more relaxed, whereas when the railings are there, it feels like the children are penned in. We need to be treating children with respect, and it doesn't feel very respectful to do that. And secondly, when it's not being in use as a splash pad, then it opens it up to other types of play. I can remember in lockdown, when before the railings were there, like seeing children rolling things down the river and you know, stomping about in wellies and things like that. So I think it opens up to more space and more types of play and more creativity. I understand that that could do a very slight bit of damage to it, but in the whole, I think having it penned off like that for most of the year doesn't send a good message. That's our park and it's their park too, and the children should be allowed to play. Thank you.
Thank you. Given that there are no voices against the recommendations, can we put it to the vote, please? So all those in favour of each of the recommendations outlined on the report, please let me know. I think that looks unanimous. Sorry. On to the next item on the agenda then, thank you. Pavement licensing.
Thank you, Chair. I've got the easy job of introducing this one, Chair. So this report plays back the outcome of the public consultation on pavement licensing. Niall McMenamin from Worcestershire Regulatory Services is going to present the report and take you through the key headlines. And just a reminder, this report will go to Licensing and Environmental Health Committee in December for a final decision. So it's this. What the ask is this evening is to raise any comments or feedback to pass on to that committee for their consideration. Over to you, Niall.
Still Duncan? Where? That should be better. We're in. Sorry? Get it procedurally correct. Thank you, Lloyd. Yes, so this is a follow-up report. For those members that remember the committee, in July you received a report giving details on the Business and Planning Act and the new pavement licensing scheme. It was modelled on the temporary scheme, and there's a bit of a misunderstanding which I certainly noticed in the consultation exercise we've undertaken, which is that people think that this is brand new and all of the businesses are just going to be licensed. Just so we'd start at the beginning, the majority of businesses, hospitality businesses in Worcestershire, already have some sort of permission from the council for tables and chairs. So whilst this is a new scheme, it's not brand new in its entirety. So it's not new to the businesses. Most of them have been through the pavement licensing scheme previously. So this is really following on from the enactment of the Business and Planning Act and it coming into force in March. So it came in pretty quickly without any warning. So most councils were playing catch up We were administering the temporary scheme, which meant that it was rolling on every 6 months. Businesses had to reapply for permissions to put tables and chairs on the high street. So this is the permanent one. So we put together the policy at Appendix 1, and following committee, we undertook a consultation with key stakeholders, businesses, members of the public, and these are the results. So in the report, you will see at Appendix 2 is a full list of all the comments that were received during the consultation. You'll see there are fairly mixed response. Some people for it, some people against. Lots of people raising, well, not concerns, but asking us to take into consideration people with disabilities, which we have. So as part of the consultation, I liaised directly with Site Concern in Worcester, and we undertook a city centre walk around. So I walked around with representatives just to see how those people with visual impairments and even people who are blind interact with your high street and the tables and chairs, and it was interesting. So following on from that, they put forward a formal response, which was why I thought it appropriate to include it in this report. They've taken the time to put the response together, and that's why it's in the report. Following on from that, the report sort of highlights that we've taken on board certainly one of the elements in relation to the style of the barriers, but it doesn't seem to be reflected in the actual policy. So it's certainly a matter for discussion, or something that we can look at and take their concerns into account when approving this particular policy. In this report, there is also details about the fees that are going to be charged. And again, most of the hospitality businesses are paying fees for their tables and chairs to be licensed. Hopefully the report is clear on how the new fee structure is going to impact businesses. And yes, there will be an increase for new businesses when licensing. So the proposal is it's going to be a 2-year license. But certainly those that are licensed already, there's a reduction, in fact, of £50 when it works out over the 2 years. So I know that was raised in some of the consultation responses where there were concerns about the costs to businesses. There will actually be a reduction to those existing businesses. So you're asked today, members, really to consider the responses, look at the policy itself, whether it's fit for purpose, and asked to recommend onto the licensing committee approval and adoption. Happy to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Niall. I hope you found the walk around with Site Concern as interesting as members did last year. It was a particularly highlighted, eye-opening discussion with Site Concern. So thank you for doing that as well. I'm glad to see that the recommendations from Site Concern have been considered and put into this report. I'm just slightly concerned that there's a bit of woolliness around the wording about the barrier around the site, and I'd like to be a bit more firm about those. That there must be a barrier, in my opinion. And whether or not it's a barrier that's constructed by the site, like by the licensee, or whether it comprises part of a level change or street furniture or street trees, we should be able to take that into consideration. But I think we need to be a bit more firm on the licensing, on that aspect of the license conditions, and perhaps even show the output from Site Concern as exemplars for potential applicants. That's the only comment I've got to make, but I'll open it up to members. Adam?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks, Niall. So the development of payment cafes, in my view, have led to a complete renaissance of Worcester City Centre. Continental style of eating and drinking in our streets have brought a new life to the area. We may have lost some of our anchor retailers, but city residents, ever-growing number of tourists, have brought new businesses to the area as they enjoy the atmosphere and collective experience of being in a vibrant centre. So first note is applause for pavement cafes, which I don't actually get from reading the policy. We're not particularly welcoming about pavement cafes, so I think we should make that as a note. I spent a lot of time looking around the centre, obviously, at particular examples, and I think we do need to assess what a more rigorous policy will do in terms of reducing the number of cafes or posing restrictions on them, which we might have to assess the impact of them. It will change the nature of some of our particular corners. There are some examples where they clearly create obstacles to pedestrians of all kind, and the worst examples are where pavements are too narrow and pedestrians would be diverted into busy through roads, which we just can't have. So there does need to be control. My first step, though, on the looking at this was to read carefully the government guidance and your draft policy, and I made a number of amendments which were to reduce the absolutism of the first draft and give you more grounds for assessment of individual cases and their circumstances, which have to be, as you say in the report, taken into account. So fine appraisal of what is right in each circumstance needs to be done. Each case must be considered on its merits. And in my view, we must trust the business who operate to do this sensibly and responsibly, and if they're not doing it, we should tell them. It's also really important to note that we can put conditions on, just as in the planning process, town planning, we can put conditions on to control things like the hours of operation. And we should be really, I don't know if we can control what actually is sold on the street, but we do need to be looking at that as we implement it. Mostly the policy is sensible and clear. And I'm glad that we're recognising that trees, bollards and planters already create diversions of pedestrian flow. Really do respect the need for site concern, and in particular main streets, I'm thinking about the High Street and Broad Street. In my view, we should be making sure that it's very limited, the number of pavement dining areas which are up against the frontage of the buildings, to allow a clear route for navigation of those who can't see alongside the front of buildings. And I think that's mostly the case on the High Street and on Broad Street. And I think there are circumstances where, just as you see in large continental squares, you will see central dining areas, and that should be allowed in Cathedral Square and hopefully in Age Old Place in the future. But we must barrier those off. The most important thing, though, in Worcester is that highways differ. We consult county highways on this, and they come back with sometimes, I think, rather a mechanistic response. It's in a highway and we don't want any impeding on that. But some highways are closed during the day, such as Pump Street. Some have very tight restrictions on traffic, like I don't know, New Street. But in the evening, they can get very busy with taxis and the evening economy. We need to think about how they change during the day. One or two of our streets have absolutely no traffic at all, apart from service vehicles and bicycles. So I'm thinking about South Quay in that position. I mentioned Foregate Street and the Cross, where we've got to be very careful because of busy traffic. The extra recommendation I want to make is about A-boards, which are ruled out from being considered as barriers in the legislation, which is bizarre because some of our businesses actually do use A-boards as a diversion to distinguish where their pavement cafes are. A-boards are a right clutter on our streets and should be enforced at the same time as pavement cafes. The County Council used to pass that responsibility on to the city. Before I was elected, I believe they took that back unto themselves. And as far as I can see, they're doing no enforcement at all. We should make very strong representations to the county that they should return the enforcement of A-boards, the control and enforcement of A-boards, to our local arrangements, and continued liaison with the city centre management team and with the bid is really important. Let's get the solutions right for the city. We can improve things, but what we've got at the moment isn't too bad. We've got to watch blind people's safety. So there you go. That's all I've got to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adam. Well, obviously well thought out. Thank you. Karen.
Hello. Thank you, Chair. I've got some concerns about whether we were requiring them to clean food left out, girls attracted, or we don't want any furry-footed critters arriving. Whether there'll be a lot of smoking allowed or whether they're not allowed to smoke. Is that down to the individual business? But we don't want people having to walk through clouds of smoke, or even pedestrians out in the street if there'd be big concentrations. And I'm also concerned about the standard of the furniture, that, you know, particularly in bad weather, it might get left or might end up blowing around the high street, that they're going to secure it properly, and it's good quality stuff in the first place. We don't want any flimsy plastic chairs going up there. And then anything else that would cause a havoc and block children, pedestrians, wheelchair users from using the street.
Thank you, Karen. And Jabba.
Thank you, Chair. Just a number of points. Councillor Scott eloquently proposed some of the issues that we are facing. The two or three concerns that I have around it is that effectively, if every food retail business was to apply for a pavement licence in terms of that, and what would our high streets or our main pedestrian thoroughfares look like as a result of it? In terms of that, and I appreciate each case is on its merits in terms of that, but more cases than not, I can remember very few pavement licenses being refused within the area, only with the tightest of spaces that have been kind of refused. So if every business that was eligible to applied, what would our high street look and shambles, etc., and our key thoroughfares look as a result of that? And what would that do in terms of movement of people in those spaces at the busiest of times? I don't think we fully kind of appreciate that. The second element is around the charging side of it. Traditionally, business rates work on floor areas and the amount of floor rates that number of space that you've got within your building, and business rates is charged that. We don't charge business rates on pavement licenses. Effectively, some businesses are doubling, if not tripling, their floor spares onto the high street, and we're charging, £500 for a new licence and £350. I know it's not quite working that way, but businesses are benefiting a huge amount, those that are in the key spaces, as a result of this. So there seems to be a little bit of an unfairness in terms of the gain that they're gaining as a result of valuable real estate on our high street that is supposed to be shared between pedestrians, shoppers, etc., and everybody else. In terms of that, I think just that concept, putting that concept out there, and I realise the original policy was around COVID, helping businesses survive under a huge economic stress, but we're kind of over COVID in that respect. These pavement lights are now here to stay. That imbalance, therefore, is, from a business perspective, it helps massively. Obviously, you would take the maximum amount of space that you are available if you're doubling your shop. I think that's a concept that I think, whether it's for this committee to decide or WRS to decide in terms of charging and who benefits from that charging, a more fair point of view. And then the third element, I think that is the most critical in this, is around enforcement. It's like, A-board enforcement, we know doesn't exist. Who's going to enforce these things? We know that the responsibility lies with WRS. We know many members have complained time and time again of lack of enforcement in other areas that WRS quite significantly are responsible for, and we're not getting that value of money from WRS in terms of the enforcement. So what guarantees are WRS going to give as a result of this policy that they are going to enforce it? Because we haven't seen it before, the public expect it, and we've been failed miserably on it.
Thank you, Jabba. I realise we've had 3 comments, Niall, and you haven't had a chance to provide any feedback. So if you've got anything to add after those first 3 comments.
A little bit harsh in relation to enforcement from WRS, and obviously I will champion WRS, being an employee of that service. When it comes to fees, likening it to business rates is always difficult because the fees are paid for the administration of the service, which is the licensing service. So it's actually the processing of the application. The enforcement side, just coming back a step, there are new enforcement provisions within this Act. Now, previously, the enforcement provisions sat with the County Council. So in reality, the District Council, the City Council were powerless to act. If somebody chose to put tables and chairs on the high street and choose not to be licensed, that really sat back. We had to refer it on to the Highways Department and then wait for them to send out their officers. Well, this is different. There is a staged approach. And as with any sort of enforcement, we will administer that staged approach by way of advice and education. And then there will be the more formal letter, should they be non-compliant. And then ultimately, within the Act, it gives the District Council or the City Council the power to actually remove those tables and chairs and then charge the business for the privilege. So, yes, we actually welcome this enforcement provision because we haven't had it previously. So officers are looking forward to administering the pavement licensing scheme with those enforcement provisions. There was another point, but I can't remember what it was, Councillor Reyes.
Just in terms of
if
every cafe or...
I personally think you're fairly safe there, because if you look at your high street, you're right, there are 1 or 2 businesses that aren't currently taking advantage, but the majority are. So the majority of hospitality businesses within the city centre already have tables and chairs on the high street. So you won't see a massive increase, I wouldn't have thought, but what you might see is the odd independent coming on board. So again, this is where the city councillors are key, because you are direct consultees, and if it is inappropriate, every application on its merits, and if there are reasons why it should be reduced, as you mentioned earlier, some of the bigger businesses, or it's appropriate between certain times, which was mentioned earlier, that will be looked at and that will be put in place.
Thank you, Niall.
Thank you, Chair. I went on that site concern walk and it was so powerful. I'm sure colleagues in the room will agree with me. One of the really good examples was a business in my ward called Junction, who have got barriers that are right to the floor. And K News was saying that that's really imperative. So I'm pleased to have seen that that's in the comments here. Thank you. On a different note, I went to a licensing subcommittee of a new premises application. And one of the reasons they were encouraged to apply was because of the pavement licensing. So I have seen evidence of businesses wanting to set up in the city because of this. And my final comment is I would love the County Council to have a policy on parklets. So having space on where cars are parked to have this, so that then the space is moved from the pavement with barriers to the road to allow better pedestrian thoroughfare. But that's for our county colleagues in highways. But that's my plea. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. So there have been a number of comments about the wording of the policy, Niall. So can I amend the recommendations to delegate to Chair and Vice Chair the final wording of the...
Yeah, well, it's delegate to
Lloyd.
the Director in consultation with Chair and Vice Chair.
Okay, are you happy with that, Lloyd?
Delegate to officers in consultation with Chair and Vice Chair.
Right, there you go. That's the wording. Delegate to officers in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair on the final wording before it goes to the Environmental and Licensing Committee. I've proposed the amendment. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you very much, everybody who seconded it. Can we have a general vote on the amendment to the recommendations? That's great. Thank you very much. So just then a final vote on the recommendations, which are note the content of the report, consider the results, recommend to Council that the fees applicable are 500 and 350, and then the new part, consultation with officers, delegate to officers in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair on the final wording. Can we have a vote on that? please. That's marvellous. Thank you. We'll return to normal programming now. So it's agenda item 5, please, which is the setting of the budget for next year and the medium-term financial plan to 2030. Over to you, Sal.
Thank you, Chair. So this is now the established approach regarding the early stages of budget setting, and committees receiving a report that follows a similar structure and methodology for a few years now, so should be familiar with councillors. The rationale at this stage is not to have a debate, but simply to put some relevant information regarding the committee in front of you, so we can get, you can see the areas that may change, and then we'll be coming back in January, and members may have a view about what they would like to see changed. And that's bearing in mind that we now have a current revenue budget gap of about £1 million for 25-26. In terms of the report, Appendix 1 shows the transition of the budgets from 2022-23 through to 2024-25, and the detailed budgets relevant to this committee covering both income and expenditure. If members are interested in understanding the detail that underpins these activities, then if you contact either Cathy Davis, who's the report author and interim head of finance, or myself, then we can dedicate some time to run through the information with you. The 24-25 Q2 year-end forecast capital programme is shown as Appendix 2, and the full capital programme approved as part of the budget is shown in Appendix 3. And finally, the relevant city plan project budgets are detailed in Appendix 4. So for now, this is more about providing information. We will be back in January with more detail. And in the meantime, if anybody has any questions or requires more information, then please get in touch and we can respond in detail. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sal. Opening it up to members. Any questions? Tor?
I have a quick question, and I imagine the answer might just be no. But in Appendix 2, there's a couple of items which are reliant on the UK SPF fund, which obviously we haven't heard much from the Labour government about whether or not we're getting that and how much we're getting. And I just wondered if there's been any updates on that at all.
Not yet on the current allocations for UK SPF for 25-26 onwards. So we know there's going to be money, but that's about as much as we know at the moment.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. It just concerns me that we don't know. Puts us in quite a difficult position. My other question was on the same page. There's a couple of things noted, like 3 Newcastle Close and 19 Newcastle Close, which are obviously a couple of properties. I just wasn't sure why they were there, what the funding goes to towards that, I guess.
Okay, I'll take that away and find out and respond accordingly through you, Chair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chair, if I may assist, they are properties that we've had the opportunity to purchase due to a shared ownership situation. And in terms of our commitment to affordable housing delivery, a decision was made that it would be prudent to purchase those properties. But in terms of the accounting treatment of them within this paper, I don't know why they warrant a specific mention, but
Thank you, Sharon.
In terms of the treatment, they were part of the budget setting papers that went to council in February.
That's really helpful. That clears everything up. Thank you.
Thank you, Tor. Adrian.
Could I just check, spending on conservation areas comes under this heading, does it?
Sorry. Yeah, I'd like to come back on that if that's possible. Yeah.
Come back to you with an answer, Adrian. Thank you. Thank you very much. Can we just agree the recommendations? All those in favour of the recommendations? Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Sam. On to the Q2 performance report for 24-25.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is the usual reporting of performance and activities associated with this committee as at Q2. For Q2, we're reporting 6 green, 5 amber and 3 red outcomes for projects and actions, and 10 green, 3 amber and 2 reds for the key performance indicators for this committee. If there are any questions, hopefully officers in the room should be able to respond with detailed answers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sal. I just wanted to say how pleased I was with the work that had been done to the Green Hub in Dines Green. Such a shame, though, that that work was spoiled following a break-in where a couple of computer monitors were destroyed. And I understand, although I need confirmation on this, that there was another break-in at Warndon Hub as well quite recently. It's just a shame that the few are spoiling it for the many. Adrian and then Edward.
Yeah, in relation to the Foregate Arches CDF fund, which is currently on red, this is in direct connection with the demolition and the opening up of the footpath down from Foregate Street to the rest of the arches. Have we got a set date on when that is going to happen yet?
Through you, Chair. We were targeting a date whereby the work to the neighbouring arches and the side of the elevation of the building which has been exposed, where all of that work has been completed, so that the project is properly complete for all intents and purposes. So although we could open up now, or so to speak, further to finishing the stabilising work, we were targeting a date where it will appear fully complete, including, all the work completed, potentially a mural painted, and a bit of a celebration event for the businesses, and therefore, mindful of the Christmas period and other Christmas events in the city, we are now targeting a January date for that to happen.
Thank you, Sean.
Just to come back, since you mentioned the break-in last night, I mean, I say break-in, it's alleged because the police investigation is ongoing. I don't want to go into too much of the details, and I don't want to sort of speculate too much. What I can say is that I was on the scene last night, and the alarm was certainly going off, and a couple of fire extinguishers were noticeably missing. It's a real shame, I think, that our hubs are being targeted by antisocial behaviour. I think it's a real challenge to the trust, really, and it's a shame because it obviously adds to their operating costs and to everything that they're trying to do. Their budget is there for supplying services, and every penny that is being spent on repairing damage is money they can't then spend on other things. I think it's important that we support and collaborate with them in tracking down the source of the antisocial behaviour that's going on. I know that there is collaboration going on between the community safety team and the police to try and get on top of the antisocial behaviour that's hitting the Warndon hub in particular. I think it's important that we do get on top of that. The hub supplies a lot of very useful services to the community nearby, so I hope that we can deal with the situation very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. Java?
No, actually, I'll carry on. I'm going to take my opportunity. I mean, in terms of, obviously, there's a serious amount of work going through this committee in terms of that, and 10 of these projects are related to Towns Fund or Future High Street Fund in terms of that, which are, in probably likely to come to full fruition in the next couple of years, hopefully, in terms of that, in terms of the amount of officer time. And it's partly related to a question probably I should have asked in the previous item, in terms of the budget, but the amount of officer time that has been involved in these, and will it then free up more officer time in terms of that, or how many posts were related to specifically these projects, and will they come to an end?
Through you, Chair. We can provide a written response to the committee if that's helpful for the purposes of budget setting. What I would say is that we have allocated some funding from some of these funding streams, but not all of them, to posts. With some of the funding streams, that wasn't an opportunity. But where we've been eligible to do that, we have done that. So, for example, you'll be aware that we have had a dedicated programme manager for Future High Streets Fund, such is the magnitude of that programme. In relation to some of the other funded opportunities, it's been more about some of the existing officer resource being allocated to those projects. They have been time intensive, undoubtedly, but what I would say is we consider that, you know, we're in a new environment with local government where grant funding opportunity has become a reality for us. And so I might suggest pragmatically, if it wasn't these funded programmes, perhaps there'll be another suite of them that take their place. And I know that there is, you know, a great deal of leadership appetite, members and officers, to pursue opportunities like this and bring about physical change in the city. So we'll bring these to a conclusion, and undoubtedly we'll be mandated to look for further opportunities.
Thank you, Sean. And Tor.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of things, if that's okay. For the Foregate arches, it says we're looking to increase the usage of Arch 27. And I just wondered what plans we had to increase that usage. And it also says the presentation made to the Cultural Compact members. Who are the Cultural Compact members?
Through you, Chair. Thank you. Yes, so Arch 27 is the leasehold interest in that is looked after by the City Council, but it's on trust for the Arches project effectively. And what that means is that usage is shared with Seven Arts and with the university. And in accordance with the Arts Council funding, it's a requirement that the use of that arch is for creative purposes. So any hiring that we do is for creative purposes. So we had quite a creative discussion about what's a creative purpose, and we've been quite creative in how we've interpreted that. But it certainly is important that it's got a dynamic creative use. It is the hiring of it, the community hiring of it, is looked after currently by the Kiln Management Services, and they have marketed the arch for us. But we've recognised with the Kiln that we need to push that usage more. The university themselves are keen to take up more of their own allocation, and Seven Arts and the council have used it for certain arts purposes, particularly Seven Arts. We're also interested going forwards in how we can market it as a mini destination before the Scala opens, in terms of opportunities where we can promote the Scala brand and creative opportunities that people might be able to do once the Scala is open. In terms of who the Cultural Compact is, the Cultural Compact is a group of creative arts organisations and cultural organisations in the city who come together to promote arts and culture within the city. The Cultural Compact itself was supported by some initial Arts Council funding, just a small amount of seed funding. The Cultural Compact has met a handful of times already, is chaired by somebody from the university, is vice-chaired by somebody from Seven Arts, is hosted and serviced by the City Council, but is a broad spectrum of arts, creative, cultural individuals and organisations in the city. And the concept of a Cultural Compact is supposed to be that partnership working to bring about greater opportunities and sort of leverage in. So, for example, the Cultural Compact met last week in a workshop format and discussed the bid that we're going to make to the Arts Council for place partnership funding. The Cultural Compact has a number of work streams, but that's being a collective voice for funding is obviously one one good use. And the doors are most definitely not closed. If other people want to join the Cultural Compact, then very much contact Zoe and we'll add individuals and organisations to the list.
Thank you, Sian. Any further comments? Jenny?
Thank you, Chair. Again, in relation to the Arches project, when the chicken shop was demolished, a fabulous glass windowed front was discovered in one of the arches. And I understand it was actually the left luggage office for the station. It's such a fabulous piece of architecture of its time. I really hope that it's going to be kept and something useful done with it. I don't know whether it could be in conjunction with Friends of Foregate Street Station, for example, but it is a really interesting space, and I'd really like to see that stay and be celebrated in some way. Is there anything planned yet, or is it too early?
Through you, Chair. Well, the heritage of the area obviously is being preserved and celebrated. In terms of the physical structures, at the moment, the professional team are stabilising what's there and looking at what can be retained and what needs to be renewed. So I can't give you a specific answer in terms of that. But we've got, there is a lot of history and heritage in that area, and one of the arches we've opened up will be a destination for sort of wayfinding, so we'll be able to tell the local stories. We've got a couple more meetings as a project board in terms of the opening up and the stabilisation decisions, a couple of meetings before Christmas. And your chair of the steering group is actually here in the room, so we can update Councillor Gregson. And then we'll be clearer then what the opening up event will look like next year. But yes, we clearly as a city we're committed to not losing heritage where we can possibly avoid it.
Thank you, Sian. And Adam?
I spoke to the contractors the other week and they said they were busy doing that arch with the windows in. They were renovating it. My question is about the route which has been created. It's one of the few non-pedestrian, non-trafficked routes, particularly for cyclists going east-west in the city. I haven't seen plans or heard of plans of how that new route, basically from Foregate Street down to the Hive and the river, will be managed in terms of active travel. And if it is to be used for cyclists, which I think it would be in any case, it should be, can we make sure there's a dropped curb convenient to link in with the other main cycle routes around there? Sorry for going on about the arches again. That I know it was just.
No, Chair, I hope I'm doing okay so far, having just taken over from Shane. Anyway, so the accessing the new walkway and cycleway, as you say, from Foregate Street, we have some public realm works to do to complete that, and I'm quite sure that will address the. So if you mean that access way, that will address the drop curb, as you say. In terms of shared usage, the proposal is that it is a shared usage route. It's a challenging piece of public realm because some people have an expectation that they can drive up there and park, and we need to manage that through the leases and deal with those issues sensitively. There are cyclists, there are walkers. It will always be a shared usage. And we go into that with open eyes, knowing how challenging that might be. But there aren't any other ways really of managing that space except to share the usage and attempt to do that responsibly.
Thank you, Sian. Any further questions? Tor?
Hi, sorry, it's a small one. It's just part of the report that I don't understand. I can't be an expert on everything. The employment land completions, that little bit, what are employment land completions and what control do we have over it?
We have just the man to answer that question. So, Duncan, thank you.
Not yet. Through you, Chair. This is simply a monitoring exercise to share with you new employment land coming forward or new employment related development coming forward. And the graph in front of you simply reflects the nature of the city that is very tightly constrained, so very little new employment development coming forwards. But that's why, for example, new employment allocation through the SWDP review is very, very important. So one particular allocation off Blackpole Road that we will be promoting and persuading the planning inspectors, hopefully next year, that it's a good allocation, a sound allocation, and that will contribute to the choice of land and sites and premises that are available within the city as opposed to on the edge of the city with things like the urban extensions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Duncan. Any further questions, points? No. Okay, thank you. There are 3 date changes embedded in this report. So the first one being the Foregate Arches Development Fund, the second being the Towns Fund Community Skills, and the third being the Economic Development Strategy. Do I need to amend the recommendations to include an acceptance of those dates?
I think that would be helpful.
Right, so I'm going to propose an amendment to the recommendations 1.2 that this committee accepts those date recommendations. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Hannah. All in agreement to the amendment? That's great. So then can we now vote on whether we note the Council's Q2 performance for 2024 and 25 and also accept the date changes? All those in favour? Thank you very much. Thank you. On to agenda item 7 then, which is the City Centre Transport Strategy Action Plan, a summary of activities. Thank you, Zoe.
Yeah. Okay, so it's just an update on where we are with the transport strategy. It came to committee here last year in July, and we were developing the plan to pass on to the county council to get them to accept it and continue and include all of our projects within it. They are currently developing an LTP5, which we hope we will benefit from. But in the meantime, we have actually delivered some of our key projects, so we are working on some of them already. So the CDF fund with the Arches project, with the pedestrian and cycle route that you were just mentioning, we are already undertaking that. We've done a number of projects through the Towns Fund with Shrub Hill, with active travel corridors and the Beryl Bike scheme that you will have already seen across the city. The next steps for the project, it's reliant on funding. There are 2 funding streams that we are currently awaiting detail on, and we're hoping and encouraging the County Council to include our projects within that. As soon as we know anything further about those funding streams and where we are with them, we will bring another report back to the committee so that you are fully informed of where we are with everything. Any questions?
Thank you for the report, Zoe. Can I just ask for my own clarification? Is County Council developing LTP5, or is that in hiatus until all funding decisions have been made?
At last conversation, they were developing it, but obviously with the details of the budget since coming through, it may be put on hold whilst other areas are reviewed and looked at. But at last conversation, it was being developed.
Thank you very much. Hannah?
Thank you, Chair. After we agreed this report in strategy at PED, several months afterwards at full council, I asked the current leaders if they'd heard any reports, any feedback from the head of highways, which was the previous head of highways, the current head of highways. And the answer was no, we'd received no response at all. I was wondering if the current head of highways at County Council had given us any feedback on this report, please. Thank you.
I've not personally had any feedback, but I can find out from Nick if he's been involved, because he works quite closely with the county council, and he's on a committee with them to look at the transport strategy. So I will find out from Nick and report back to you if that's okay.
Thank you, Zoe. Hannah?
Thank you very much, Chair. I just feel this is the City Council sending a very clear message to County Council about what we want our transport strategy to be. It's disappointing that we haven't had a clear response from County Council in this, given that we are the county city of Worcestershire. So I just wanted to say that that is disappointing, and I hope that the current head of highways does give us some information. Thank you.
I mean, I have to agree with you. We funded this report at the behest of county. And it is a shame that they haven't come back to us with any kind of positive response. But all I can say is officers are talking to county at every opportunity in order to raise the city's priorities. So I'll go to Adrian next, then Adam, and then you, Katie.
Yeah, and Councillor Cooper, without attempting to sound patronising, welcome to the world of two-tier working, because this is the way the county council has treated the city council for a very long time. No, I'm not trying to be patronising. I'm just saying that is the situation we're in, because they patronise us. That's the way in which they deal with us in terms of highway strategies. And the report is slightly disingenuous when it says the draft strategy was presented in July 2023. It was, Zoe, you're absolutely right. Of course, it'd been in various draft forms and building forms for many years before that, before we dragged the county council kicking and screaming to do the behest, because we put the money up to do it, because they would not have done it otherwise. And unfortunately, that's the situation we're in. In other areas around the country, it's not uncommon for the senior tier authority to delegate highways matters in a situation like this to a district authority of our size and importance, and it's unfortunate that the county has not chosen to do that. There's no doubt that officers are working very hard on a mutual basis, but the situation is politically difficult, and I know that that's not a party political statement. There are politicians from all colours at both tiers who simply do not seem to be able to agree on the way in which the city should be treated in terms of its transportation plan. It's not clear at all from this whether we would be consulted, when we get consulted, and what notice they take of us when we are consulted, because on the LTP4 we made various comments to the City Council, unanimous cross-party comments which were ignored. So our only hope is that on this occasion LTP5 will start to address some of those key issues that we've talked about. I promoted as leader of the City Council in conjunction with Louis Stephen at the time in particular, and I think that those three areas that are highlighted in 2.5 are our crucial areas. Obviously they impact on other aspects of the transportation of the city as well, but to continue to ignore the fact that the hub of the city is so central to the wider county network in terms of its bus services, its train services, its cars, and everything else, its total economy, is very short-sighted. And I do hope that after the elections in May, we have a fresh set of eyes at County Hall to look at this and to address it in a more common sense, practical manner.
Thank you, Adrian. I did say Adam next and then Katie.
I'm incredibly disappointed by this report. I'm expecting a lot more about a city centre transport strategy than we have at the moment. Our schemes are very worthy, but are by no means solving the need to promote active travel in the city centre and solve some of the congestion problems, to get people onto the cars and onto the buses and onto their bikes and walking. I personally cycle a lot around the city centre, and I'm afraid I will continue to break the law on practically every occasion I use the place until matters are resolved. What I'd wonder if we should be doing is going back to the... sorry, you can tell me off afterwards if that's...
Put in a word allegedly in there, please.
Allegedly. It's a matter of enforcement, as we all said. But seriously, in terms of there must be some specific condensed agenda of important things we would like to see done early in the city centre in terms of reorganisation of the highway network. And I wonder whether there will be opportunity in the next few months for us to come back with a short, punchy set of real key targets we would like to do in terms of new routes through the city centre, particularly for cycling. And I know that Bike Worcester would be very keen to help deliver that agenda for us.
I can certainly take a look at it and take what we've got within the strategy, and we can look at them in more detail if you'd appreciate that.
Yeah, a good wish list is what I'm sort of aiming for.
And I'd just like to point out as well, and I don't know whether you've seen it or had opportunity to see it yet, but the transport strategy itself does contain a number of options that we were presenting to county to help resolve some of the issues that the city centre is experiencing, including improved active travel routes. So I thoroughly recommend the report and the strategy itself, so I can pass those on to you. Secondly, you may want to have a chat with your local constable about breaking the law so frequently, and I recommend that you do that with some haste, but neither here nor there. Thank you very much, Adam. And Zoe, and finally Katie.
Not too sure how I'm going to follow that. I don't think I have any confessions to make. I assume Councillor Scott's talking about the TRO, but I waited patiently for the bells to chime 6 before I cycled down this evening. I will never pass up the opportunity to remind everybody, as has already been said, just how woeful our active travel infrastructure is in Worcestershire. And whilst I grateful for the report that's brought to us today, there is so much to do, and the issue of the fact that our health and our well-being and our productivity in Worcester could be so greatly enhanced and improved if there were county council commitment to decent active travel in Worcester and in Worcestershire. I would like to tell you that it was a 4-kilometre cycle for me today to get here. It's 4 kilometres. I'd probably actually rather get a bus, but there are no buses back to the Warnder villages at that time. 4 kilometres is... I'd be inexcusable for me to get into a car to do that journey, quite frankly, in a climate emergency. So I cycled 4 kilometres. It took me just over 17 minutes, probably because I had to wait for the bells to chime on the high street so I could cycle down. And during that time, I received 2 dangerous close passes, one of which actually shook my bike as I was riding. So that is just on one average Monday, and this happens to me every single time I get on my bike. And yes, I was wearing a helmet and a high-vis, and I had working lights, and even so, 2 people decided to take an attempt on my life this evening, and that is the reality every single time I get on a bike, and it should not be that way. And so again, and I urge members to make more noise about active travel in Worcester. I urge us not to get involved into kind of approaching culture wars, which possibly doesn't apply to people sat in the room tonight, but sometimes does. Make more noise about this. We're kind of complicit in how pathetic active travel is in Worcestershire by not talking about it, which is why I'm so heartened to hear other members talking up tonight about it. But yeah, so I did make tonight's meeting, but I could have been waiting in A&E for a couple of days to try and wait if either of those cars had been successful in taking me out. So yes, and I face the same going home again tonight. So already I'm anxious about how I get home this evening, and that should not be the case.
I couldn't agree with you more, Katie. Thank you. Hannah.
Thank you, Chair. Oh,
I do apologise to all you were before, Hannah. Sorry about that.
Sorry, Hannah. I just wanted to, it's not a question, just a comment to raise my frustrations at the most recent government's budget, which has not made it clear enough about the redeployment of HS2 and about the allocation of the UK SPF. It just leaves us in a very difficult situation, and lots of our projects that Worcester residents are, excited about rely on this funding, and I would really like some more pushing upon both of those things to see whether or not we're getting them.
Thank you, Saul. Point taken. Hannah?
thank you, Chair. In reference to 3.6, it's wonderful that there's been more EV charging. I would just encourage officers, as I've said, Environment Committee, to keep checking and seeing if there's research around how to do EV charging in flood risk areas. Many of our car parks do flood, and that's a major issue for residents who are looking to do EVs. Many residents in my ward don't have drives. In fact, I think there are only maybe 3 or 4 streets that do in the whole ward. So that's a really important part of our air quality strategy. So it's just a plea to just keep looking and see if there are case studies in other parts of the country. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sure there are. I know my colleague Richard talks frequently about street EV chargers and the County Council's steadfast refusal to allow on-street charging. Thank you, Hannah, and then Edward.
Thank you. I must definitely agree with Councillor Collier about the need for more buses, especially as someone who grew up in Warndon villages, and I hope she will forgive me for making the journey by car here today. I made the journey. I will also point out that I was very careful, and I'm always very careful about cyclists on Tullydine Road. It is no doubt very, very dangerous. I learned to drive purely because the public transport was so woeful from the point I was growing up. Sadly, about buses, I have to say, obviously there's no mention of them in this report. I imagine that is largely down to the fact that we have no options to work with from the County Council. I look forwards to local authorities like ours receiving more powers from central government to run, operate and fund our own services, so we can actually provide some real leadership and maybe show the County Council how it's done. Buses are the most economic and access-friendly form of transport, especially for people in deprived areas who are elderly or who have disabilities. I think it is unacceptable that we're left hamstrung like this, unable to do more to support our residents who are crying out for a better bus service, running more frequently and for longer hours. So I would like to echo me colleague Councillor Gregson's comments about hoping for a distinct change of direction at the County Council following the next round of local elections. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. Any other questions, comments? Okay, can we just take a quick vote on the recommendations then, which are to note the contents of this report? All those in favour? Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Zoe. You up next as well? Yeah, so shall we just have a 5-minute break, if that's all right with everybody? Pause for 5 minutes, please, Margaret. Right. So next item on the agenda is agenda item 10, which is the business support and skills update. So over to you again, Zoe.
Okay, so this the report just gives you an idea of where we are with the delivery of local business and the people and skills elements of the UK SPF programme. The 2.1 shows how much money we've had to spend on each of the individual years. We are actually quite close to spending all of it. We have one or two bits of money that we are re-looking at. But if you'd noticed in the budget, we have been told we've got UK SPF for another year. We don't know how much or what it's going to be spent on, whether it's going to be the same themes. We do know it's going to be less than we've had previously, but we don't know how much less. So we will get back to you as soon as possible with any details on that. But it does mean if we have underspent this year, we will be able to carry it over into the extended year. So there is not so much of a rush and a dash to spend that money. But it is a small amount out of the total budget, it's around 60k. So we should effectively spend that. Now, as far as local business are concerned, the majority of delivery has been done with either ourselves, with the City Council, the LEP, the County Council, and the Growth Hub. So the majority of projects there. We are actually achieving or on track to achieve all of our outputs and all of our spend in these projects. They've moved quite quickly, and some of them will actually overachieve. The demand is so high, particularly around the business support, the working with businesses to advise and guide them into startup and growth from the positions they're in. We've got a lot of demand for that activity, so if we do want to do it again or extend those contracts for another 12 months, which we will look at when we get confirmation of funding, but they are very successful and are creating quite a response from our businesses. They are happy to apply for grants or even just to be part of the networks of negotiation and talking around business development. People and skills has only delivered in this year. So the funding only started this year, apart from one project, which was a carryover from the BBO programme in USIF. We were allowed to carry that project on, which is the community housing project, and that was dealing with some of the most disadvantaged individuals to support them through to be employment ready or at least education ready. So they are the harder to reach individuals. So it's a much more focused programme and includes the wider agenda around the individual, which is social care, health, and other social issues that they need to deal with before they can even possibly be ready for employment. So that's a much more focused programme. The Careers Hub Worcester as well, you will have seen in the Hive. It's a very busy project. We have a lot of young people through those doors and a lot of young people who are finding some great success in identifying jobs and training opportunities. So it is going really, really well. And it is actually probably one of our biggest projects. If you have been to WCT this morning for the BB2 project, you will have seen also the redevelopments that we've done for the Community Skills programme in Towns Fund. We've supported that with revenue funding to do some of the delivery in those community hubs. So there's a ICT and basic skills support being delivered by WCT, which is funded through UK SPF. Again, is achieving really well. We have a lot of people coming through the doors, particularly for the digital skills, and it's wider than just being able to apply for a job online. It's actually much more focused digital skills, so it's anything from being able to turn your laptop on to being able to use your phone and text on your phone, and that's going really, really well, and there's a lot of demand for that across the WCT Community Hubs programme. We do have a Green Skills course, which is new and has just begun to deliver. We haven't programmed any outputs in at the beginning of the project because it's an external organisation who had a lot of setup work to do within Worcester, but they are starting to make contacts now and are out there talking to our businesses and developing, offering training programmes to individuals in business. As I say, it is achieving. We are likely to have a little bit of underspend, but we have plans for what we can do with that, and we also have the opportunity to roll it over if needs be. And we will be looking at what we do for the next 12 months as soon as we get the guidance through from government, and we'll be back to speak to you about that as soon as we know anything.
Thank you, Zoe. Again, you know, these are some impressive numbers in here, especially on the outputs. So really, really pleased, and especially on the digital skills work that's being done. So I'll just open that up to members. Any questions? Adam first, then Edward.
Thank you. Zoe, I'm sorry, I'm not been on PED properly or before, but could you give a bit more detail about the business support measures? Do you target any particular sector, and could you give a summary of the types of business that have been supported? I'm not even sure who the Worcester Growth Hub is, so anything, quick information on that, you could maybe report later to me. And have you got any job figures as a result of those business support measures which you've given grants to?
We do have job figures. They're not included in this report because we're not targeted for job figures for the majority of these programmes, but I can provide those for you if you'd like to see them. As far as the business support programme is concerned, there is a business startup programme, and that's for any business. So that's micro industries to general startup programmes, and helping people to develop their business plan with a grant attached so that they can launch their businesses. We then have growth businesses, so the slightly larger organisations that are looking to develop either with export or with plans around their staffing or their development, so that they can move on from where they are to bigger premises or along those lines. We offer it to all businesses at the moment. It's an open offer. We haven't identified specific businesses, apart from in the Better Than, the incubator space, which is focused around digital and media businesses. That has a particular focus, and that is looking at it around the innovation agenda. We do some work for visitor economy businesses, so that those in the city centre that support our footfall and our economic development within the city. We do have focused activity with them. I can give you some more detail on the Growth Hub, and I can provide you with a lot more detail on who they are, what they deliver, and the sort of outcomes that we're looking to get from them, if that would help.
Thank you. That would be very useful, either email or if you've got hard copies in our pigeonhole, that would be very, very useful. Thank you.
On the Growth Hub, Zoe, I've also asked for a report to come to this committee about the work that they do and the outputs that we get.
That's fine. I've already started on that report, so.
Edward.
I fear I may now be asking a third time for the same thing. Hopefully not. I was going to say, in terms of the stats that you've given us for digital skills provision and things like that in the report, is there any data available on which of the hubs has been delivering those, and whether there's any difference geographically in what they're providing, so that we're sort of channeling the appropriate support?
I can get that detail for you. We haven't asked for it broken down, but it is broken down. I've spoken to Helen at WCT, so they do know where the people are coming from and where the most demand is. Dines Green tends to be the one with the most demand, and I think that's a lot to do with the refurbishment and the improvements that have been made there. People actually want to be part of the centre and want to come in, but it's working across the board. So yeah, I can get the details to you for exactly where people are coming from.
Thank you, because my concern is, obviously we do a lot of work with the Warndon Hub. There are some of the classes that they're giving which we can see are very well attended. There are others where I suspect perhaps not getting quite so well attended, and it would be really useful to have some stats to put next to that perception. I mean, we're really keen to support the work that they're doing and to make sure that the community's aware of the offer, and if we've got those stats, we can see where we're succeeding and where we're not.
I'll include those details in future reporting.
Thank you, Edward. Thank you, Zoe. Jabba, and then Hannah.
Thank you, Chair. The targets all seem to be just in the amount of people going through these schemes, have we? What other measures of success are we using on UK SPF? What is the economic benefit to Worcester, and what's the cost-benefit ratio in relation of money invested and benefit gained? Do we know? Are we going to measure those, or have we got a report, or have you got any of those stats to hand?
There will be a full evaluation of all of the programmes and projects within the UK SPF programme to give us an idea of exactly what difference it's making, and we can also look at value for money within that evaluation. So it was due to be at the end of this financial year, purely because we thought it was ending in March, but I think we probably will go ahead with it, just so we know it gives us some evidence for what we do with next year's funding. So we are going to secure the services of somebody to be able to do a full evaluation for us.
Thank you, Zoe. Hannah?
Thank you very much, Chair. In the LinkedIn 2023 Green Digital Skills report, it was noticed that 9 in 10 women lack a single digital green skill, and that gap is widening. I was wondering if you could provide me any detail within the green skills courses, if you're going to be looking at that gender gap and promoting it to women, and any more details surrounding that, please. Thank you.
We can do. It's because that programme is only just starting. We have the opportunity to continue to influence it. The organisation that we've taken on are very flexible and are happy to respond to any requests from us to focus in a particular area or particular support for a business. So I'm more than happy to ask them to make a focus for women and green digital skills. I can get you details of exactly what projects and what training they're offering at the moment. A lot of it is around business and employees, but they are also looking at skills for people who aren't in work. So they're doing a broad approach to the training, depending on where the demand comes from. But yeah, we can get some more detail on those projects and those courses that are being delivered.
Thank you, Hannah and Zoe. Karen?
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering, with the economically inactive, are you completing surveys and feeding back to perhaps other organisations where they might be able to help, and particularly things, you know, what the barriers are and how to encourage and overcome those barriers? And I know transport is definitely one of them, and it's difficult to take up a job or even see yourself taking up a job if you can't get there.
One of the focuses of that project is the development of links with key workers from all different areas, so from social services, from schools if they're young enough, from to job centre, to across the board, and health services as well. So that the focus is to develop those networks more effectively, so these people are talking to each other and responding to the needs within the area. So yeah, that is a particular focus for that project.
Thank you. Jabba?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. It is worth mentioning we had visit to Giants Green Hub today, and the new building block 2 centre that they're building there, and talking to GLP, one of the training providers that we initially had. I think, to be fair to say, concerns around in terms of building block 1 and the excellent work that they've been doing in terms of the green skills, green skills, and what they propose hopefully in building block 2, if it kind of goes ahead, addresses some of the concerns that some of the people are having around green skills within the city, and that's specifically been adapted from conversations with employers in terms of the obviously not only locally based, the national needs for that, and having said that, I've been really impressed with the offer that they've been providing and the actual need and employability of those people that are going through those courses. And through you, Chair, I think it would be worth having a conversation with them and see if they can present a report within possibly this committee in terms of presentation of what they've been doing around skills within the city.
Thank you, Jabba. Anything you want to add on to that? No. It is with regret that I couldn't make the Building Block 2 tour this morning. I would have really enjoyed that. So, on to the final item of the agenda this evening. It's agenda item 11, the Swan Theatre. Is that you, Zoe?
It's me again, sorry. Yeah. This is a report just to, the appendix gives some details on what the Swan Theatre have been delivering over the past 12 months. It also looks into details about audience numbers, where the audience are coming from, and some of the activity they've been delivering over the past 12 months. We do at the moment provide them with a payment to Worcester Theatres as part of our agreement, a grant agreement with them. I think they're 120,000 they had for the past year, and those are the report shows the results of that activity that has been used with that funding, some of that funding. And that's where we are. There's quite a lot of detail in the report, in the appendix, that gives you a sort of wide range of all of the activities they're delivering and how the programme is going. Any questions?
Thank you, Zoe. Tor?
I only had one question, which is about the section on environmental and sustainability. It's literally right at the end of the report, talking about the outdated generic lighting rig to be replaced with LED lighting, obviously, if they have funding for it. I just wondered if you had any ideas about where appropriate funding could come for this LED lighting rig, because it's quite amazing that they don't have one at this stage.
We're working with them at the moment to look at funding generally for some of their activities moving forward. So we haven't identified any funding yet for that particular project, but it is on the list as we're doing a funding search for all of the activities that they're delivering over there. So at the moment, don't know, but it is on the agenda to keep looking for an appropriate funding source wherever that comes from. It may likely be a trust funding rather than any of the mainstream programmes, but we'll let you know as soon as we know anything.
Thank you, Zoe Tor. And Edward?
You said questions. Does that allow for comments?
Absolutely.
Thank you. You'll note that I did ask a question first.
You're a politician, Edward. Nobody expects a straight question from politicians.
So I was going to say, obviously, I'm a big fan of the theatre. I am an incorrigible, lifelong theatre kid myself. But I think there's no question the Swan is delivering significant value for communities across the city, not just within the city centre, but across the whole of Worcester and beyond, as the statistics show. I mean, they're putting on shows with a mixture of professional and amateur companies. The production that I was lucky enough to see, they had 3 professional actors and a number of amateur performers who were very enthusiastic and very talented, very well supported, and I think who'd gained a lot from having the opportunity afforded to them to actually perform alongside professional actors. It's clearly a boon to the mental health and the well-being of the community, as well as just putting on a really nice show. It's accessed by people all across the city, as I've mentioned, and I'm happy to say there's going to be a group going from the Open Door Cafe to see a production of Aladdin, which is a treat I'm sure many of them will enjoy. I think there is no question, it bears mentioning, that the Swan has a challenging inheritance in terms of some maintenance issues that it's tackling at the moment. I've heard complaints circulating around the internets around the water and the system in there. I think it's important that we as councillors don't wash our hands, if you'll forgive the expression, of these problems now that the matter is in the hands of a different body. I want to make sure that we recommend a collaborative approach to our relationship with the theatres. They are going to be essential, I think, to the city's arts and culture offer, and that will be central to any future economic potential of the city. and we cannot execute a plan like that if we don't have a strong and mutual relationship with them. So may I suggest that we reach out to the management of the Swan and explore any options that we have to support them, whether that's with finding grants that they can apply for, anything like that, to help them get on top of the maintenance that they've inherited. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. Karen?
Thank you, Chair. I'm very impressed, I have to say, at the number of tickets booked from Birmingham, given Birmingham's got some excellent theatres, but even more that nearly 10,000 have come from Dudley. Is there not a theatre in Dudley? So, yeah, the fact that I had not, until I saw this report, realised the draw that the theatre is putting on. And obviously that's income and economic, you know, people coming out, coming in, they're using our car parks, they'll be eating, drinking here, hopefully. And what a wonderful thing that is for our nighttime economy.
Thank you, Karen. Katie?
Thank you. In a way, sort of leads on from things that Councillor Kimberley was saying, but it's wonderful to see the range of activities. That's absolutely brilliant. But the Swan Theatre does have accessibility issues, particularly for those who are disabled. And I understand that this report is very much focusing on, you know, the achievements of the last 12 months, but it would have been nice to have seen some acknowledgement of that being an aim or an ambition to really kind of tackle some of those equality issues surrounding, you know, the building.
And members may remember that we did put in some bids for some improvements to the accessibility on the Swan Theatre. Without wishing to labour, if you'll excuse the pun, the parlous state the previous government left the economy in, we've had to do without that funding, although we are still fighting for it, is my understanding.
Yes, the government have opened a consultation on that 5 million culture capital. What would be the implications of us not receiving that? So we've got until mid-December to submit our consultation response. We'll be working with group leaders and very much making the argument that this funding is essential for economic growth within the city.
Thank you, Sian, and thank you for that point. Well made, Katie. Jabba, and then Jenny.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You know, and thank you for raising that point, Councillor Collier, and it's well received in terms of that. Obviously, it's not maybe not recognised in this report in terms of that issue, but it has been recognised by them. Hence the great amount of work that's gone into submitting that bid on their behalf in terms of that. And it's crucial that actually we look at obviously if the fund cultural fund isn't received, in terms of what other options are available in order for them to realise that ambition, because it is a key asset and it's a key destination point, and the numbers obviously prove in terms of how much economic value they bring to the city. I just want to talk in terms of obviously the relationship with the Swan. Well, since the Future High Streets Fund applications have gone in, and how that relationship has been strained, and I think there's an acknowledgement, and without sounding like a previous broken record that I've mentioned on a number of occasions over the past few months regarding how that relationship has been received, perceived, and translated in terms of that, in terms of the approach that we've had with them. Hopefully the relationships have been warmed and repaired, and an acknowledgement that they have always been a significant part of this, where they may have not have felt, sorry, part of this city and a part of this economic offer, where previously they may not have felt that, especially in and around the approach that was taken by previous previous leaders as regards the Scala in terms of that, and in terms of that. So this is just putting it out there. Actually, what they bring to the city, they bring a significant amount. They reach audiences that traditionally haven't been able to, and they have a long future, hopefully, within the city.
Thank you, Jabba. Right, Jenny, and then Hannah.
Swan Theatre really does do great small productions, Local focus, there's recently one on Hannah Snell, a Worcester woman who turned warrior and went adventuring. But it was in a small space, which was fine because it was a small production, but it was so hot. And following on from a previous comment, LEDs would have made such a big difference in that space. They would have not only provided better lighting solutions, but also probably saved a hell of a lot of energy as well. So I really would like to see that brought forward at the earliest opportunity for the benefit of the theatre.
Thank you, Jenny. And Hannah.
Thank you, Chair. The Swan is a building that directly feels the impact of climate change through flooding. I would have liked to see a bit more ambition in terms of environmental goals and aims within this report. I think the things that are in there are quite basic at the moment, and I would encourage them to have a bit more ambition. Having said that, I've had many fantastic experiences at the Swan. The staff are amazing. It's a fabulous venue. But that would just be my plea to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? No. I'd just like to add that, like many members of this committee, I am gobsmacked by the amount of work that they do and the reach that they have within the city. And like you, Karen, I was surprised at the reach of the Swan and how valuable a part it plays in this city's economy. So without much further ado, then I'd like to vote on the recommendation, which is to note the contents of this report and the support provided by this authority on the ongoing activities of the Swan Theatre. All those in favour? Again, thank you very much. It's been a very congenial evening. And that's the end of the meeting. There is no further business, no extra business, so brilliant. Thank you very much and see you at the next instalment.